Thank you, Professor Saleh, for the opening remarks, but also for leading us in organizing these very important events. I would like to welcome the audience and also our wonderful speakers who are, like Mualim Yunus said, both alumni of the department. So we have a strong panel, which is also that rich, and I am going to introduce to us. And like Mualim Yunus said, Riana will be joining us shortly. Alumnus Riana Lynn, the founder and CEO of Journey Foods, is leader in food innovation, technology, and venture strategy. After 10 years impactful years in food innovation, Rihanna founded Journey Food supply chain and product management software that impacts thousands of food business across the US and beyond. As a former biologist turned serial entrepreneur, her development strategies are pivotal to some of the world's most innovative food and agriculture startups and Fortune 500 companies. She graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Biology and African American and Diaspora Studies from the University of North Carolina and a master's degree at Northwestern University. A native of Chicago, Rihanna likes to build pro bono websites for small businesses and visit Black culinary and architectural heritage sites around the world. Dr. Ronda Taylor Bullock is also a AAAD alumnus and is originally from Galveston, North Carolina. In 2018, Dr. Bullock earned her doctorate at UNC Chapel Hill in the Policy, Leadership, and School Improvement Program. Dr. Bullock's research interests include critical race theory, whiteness studies, white children's racial identity construction, and anti-racism. Prior to entering her doctoral program, Dr. Bullock taught English for almost 10 years at Hillside High School in Durham, North Carolina, where she now resides. She is the co-founder and executive director of WeAre, which stands for Working to Extend Anti-Racist Education. As a nonprofit, WeAre works to equip children, families, and educators with the knowledge and skills necessary to understand the complexity of racism. We are using approach to dismantle systemic racism in education and beyond by offering summer camps for children in rising first and fifth grade, workshops for families, and professional development for educators. Dr. Bullock is the wife of Dr. Daniel Kelvin Bullock and mother of son Zion and daughter Zaire. Finally, our moderator, alumnus Pierce Freelon, is an acclaimed hip hop, soul, electronic musician, and Emmy Award winning producer, director of, and professor from Durham, North Carolina. For over 15 years, Pierce has traveled the world teaching hip hop and music production to youth in community centers. He is the co-founder of Beatmaking Lab, an Emmy Award-winning PBS web series. Pierce has taught in the departments of music and African American and Diaspora Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He is the writer, composer, and co-director of an animated series called History of White People in America, an official selection of the Tribeca Film Festival, which will premiere PBS World this July. Pierce is also the founder of Black Space, a digital makerspace where he has mentored dozens of youth teaching digital storytelling through music and film. For over a decade, Pierce has been the frontman of critically acclaimed jazz hip hop quartet The Beast and has toured internationally and released a series of albums, EPs, and mixtapes. He is the son of famed Grammy nominated jazz vocalist Nana Freelon and the late preeminent architect of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Phil Freelon. Pierce lives in Durham with his wife and their two young children. So we will hand the floor over to my colleague, Piers, to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, Dr. Saleh, for calling your former students together for this wonderful conversation. So let's just jump right into it. I have put some questions together. Oh, and I want to invite, formally welcome Riana, who has just joined us. How you doing? Oh, your mic is muted.
Oh, great. I'm really great. I'm happy to join the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, welcome.
For the invite.
Welcome to the party. Sorry for talking over. There's a little bit of a delay. Did you want to finish that thought?
I was just saying thank you for the invite. It's a great closeout to the week. So many conversations, especially over the past month. From me to share my UNC story and my general story. So thank you, and excited for the conversation.
Well, good. Well, why don't we start with you? You mentioned your UNC story. All been through that campus in Chapel Hill, and the Department of African American and Diaspora Studies was a refuge. The classes were dealing with topics that you didn't see elsewhere on campus. The relationships that I had to professors was not transactional. It was nurture, was healing, and the mentorship was very authentic. Like Dr. Saleh, you're my real life auntie. Like she's a real auntie, and I'm her you. And I thought that was unique for me on a campus like UNC Chapel Hill. Could you talk about your experience and how this distinguished department and its professors impacted your life?
Yeah, wow, it was quite interesting. So I came first as an athlete. I was on an academic scholarship, but that's how I was first introduced to the campus. And I thought that the opportunity to join a school in the Research Triangle was largely going to be based around STEM. I did a minor in chemistry, a major in biology, and as soon as I took my first class, I can't remember who the professor was. I should remember this now, but it was African American Studies, post Civil Rights Movement, in the post 1965. This professor was like 10 years ago, but I decided to double major as soon as I took my first FM Studies class, and I remember in 10th grade when I first learned about Jacob Lawrence and his work over many decades. And I felt the same sort of invigoration and peace and family with my classmates that I did not find in being a thrower on the track and field team, that I did not find in any of my classrooms in biology 101 with 150 classmates and 3 other Black folk in the class, and I immediately knew that something that was going to shape not only my experience at UNC, but also how I viewed the world and the problems that I wanted. I knew immediately that it was going to shape the way that I left the campus and how I wanted to view the problems and the ways that I applied STEM to my career. And I am still grateful for that experience.
Thank you. Thank you for that. What about you, Dr. Ronda Bullock Brown? Please tell me what your experience was like. How has this department shaped your work in your life?
It really did. I knew coming in that I wanted to study African American history, given the context from which I grew up in, having been denied that history in my learning and education spaces. I knew I wanted it, and it was immediately attracted to trying to take all the courses that I could possibly take. And I was first generation college student. So I just remember coming in and meeting with my advisor that first year and saying, I want to major in African American English. I didn't know the language, that's what I was saying. And I just remember being told that is not a major. And there was no, but we have an African American Studies department. There was no follow-up. It was like, no, you can't do that. And so, but I was like, I know this class is like, what's the problem? Like, I only know a little bit. But then through some research, I was able to locate these classes and recognize, after I took one, I found myself, like, it was everything for me. It was everything that I had missed growing up. It was affirming in my identity. Could have taken more classes, I would have. I was told that if I took any more extra classes, I was going to have to pay for them because I guess I was just taking too many, and which might not have been true, I don't know. But at the time, I just wanted to take all of them, and I found myself. I found my identity. I felt visible. The history that I had never learned, the professors, their caring nature, their passion about the history and the topic, their and help decolonize my mind. Came in with a lot of problematic beliefs about myself and about my people, and it got all of that checked through them, and thankfully so. And it has been the foundation of the work that I do. It was the foundation of the work that I did as an educator, and when I was teaching in the classroom, and it's the foundation of the work that I do now as an anti-racist activist. I'm always pulling. I still have every single notebook from undergrad. I have gone back and went to the notes, because I remember when I was teaching a text that I had also read in undergrad, and I pulled my professor's notes. And so it just meant a lot to me. And it also helped and encouraged me to do the big chop. Before, right after I graduated in spring 2004, I was still trying to let my roots grow out a little bit so that I have a little bit of teeny weeny fro. And by July, I had cut my hair off. I did the big chop, and I've been natural ever since. And that department and affirming who I was contributed to me being able to love myself in that way.
Thank you for sharing that testimony. I see Dr. Saleh is crying because she loves us so much. This is your legacy, Dr. Saleh and Dr. Halls too. Y'all have done such a wonderful job preparing us for the world. And I say that with all of my heart. So grateful. I see you got me emotional up in here. I'm doing my voice. I'm doing the little thing with my voice. Okay, we got a lot of guests on here, 85 people. So y'all about to see some Black folk crying. That's all good. Let's get vulnerable. So I just want to echo something both of y'all said. That first class, the very first time you had African American Studies class, it was world changing. And I wanted more. That's how I felt. I had never felt that way in a classroom in my life. And you know, you've been through some school, from elementary all the way to high school, and to not really see yourself affirmed that way until you're 18, 19 years old, it just felt like a breath of fresh air. And you, Dr. Saleh, people like Dr. Perry Hall, Dr. Hildebrand, such a wonderful group of personalities, and again, challenging us. To this day, same thing as you, Dr. Bullock Brown. I have a file cabinet where I keep my syllabus. Sometimes I need to go find that book, you know, that text that I studied that was so important for me. And the other thing that I keep around is, I also keep my note and things to this day. I still think about, you know, don't use the word slave, say the word enslaved, because words create worlds, and a slave is a piece of property. Enslaved is something that happens to a human being. Like, it really, the decolonizing of our language and the way that we view the world is really one of my biggest takeaways from the department. So I want to go back to you, Dr. Bullock Brown, real quick. Could you talk about a specific way that it shaped your ability to recognize and address anti-racism in your work? What's one time where you dug through the notes and it helped you at a race equity training, or it helped you classroom? Give me just, if you could think of one.
And I was gonna say, it's Taylor Bullock. I know you were saying Brown in there, but no, you're good. But one piece in helping me, I will say, like, I've been doing this anti-racism work is rooted in all of the things that I learned, because it supports me. It's when I'm getting challenged, I can pull from the history, right? But one very specific memory that I want to do is actually when I was teaching, which was a part of helping me to become this anti-racist educator. Previously, for almost 10 years at Hillside High School in Durham, North Carolina, which is historically one of the few remaining historically Black schools in our state. And I used to teach the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. For the 9th graders I taught, I would do an excerpt, and for when I taught the juniors and seniors, I would do the full text. But at any rate, I went and pulled back my notes on neonatal alienation. And I pulled out my notes on the chiasmus that Frederick Douglass went through from being, going from a man to a brute, to a man. And so it was like this chiasmus of that. This was from my notes of how when Frederick Douglass was born a man, but from being enslaved, he was treated as a brute. And then when he fought back his master, he went from a brute back to it. And using that language and using the language of chiasmus, I was dropping that and neonatal alienation on the students, and they would always, blow their minds, right? I never got anything like that. And this, I pulled it directly from the pages in my notes from my undergrad class. And so helping the students to develop that admiration for Frederick Douglass as an ancestor and the work that he did, and helping them to have that language behind how slavery dehumanized us, right? And just them, and also letting them know that those of us who were enslaved also fought back, and centering that narrative around that story of this is how he fought back and reclaimed his manhood. And so that's a specific lesson that I pulled from my undergraduate years and taught that specifically to my students.
Yes. Snaps. You couldn't hear me, but I was snapping the whole time. What about you, Ms. Lynn? Could you talk about a time or a moment where you kind of tapped that curriculum for something relevant to the important work you do in food?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's happening all the time for me. I remember when I first went to the continent of Africa, and Professor Saleh's class was very integral in how I looked at the continent. I was invited there as an entrepreneur to inspire a crop of more young women to lead the way and become entrepreneurs in Guinea Conakry and Senegal. Very near and dear to my heart. And when I arrived there, and I spoke to her last week about this, and I always point back to my, the Walter Rodney book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I told her, this is something that will be a part of my life's work, to not only get African products to the rest of the world when it comes to food, also to own property there, to live there, to develop manufacturing there, to grow my company there. And the work I continue in, as running a for-profit business, educating people around me, especially showing up in food and technology, two of the most powerful industries in the world. I go into rooms with very powerful people, and I end up speaking on stages where I'm typically one of the only, leaders that looks like me, that's even Black. And for me, I have to continue to speak through not only the readings, but the present developments that have really shaped me, that the curriculum really shaped and brought into and enlightened me around. And I'm so terribly grateful for everything that I learned walking through the campus. Even the moments when I remember walking for a class to go to the main library and sitting in the archive system and sort of being proud, because they're like, the UNC has the biggest Southern archive, but then you go in there and it's like, it also archives around slave receipts, for example. And I stood right there reading those things and seeing that, the comparing how much a young girl costs to how much it would cost for an acre of cotton something. And all of those experiences have really shaped me, being in a food and agriculture. And also my Africana classes have really shaped how I envision the future. I speak of the future of the world is within the heart of Africa. And I'm so grateful to not only have now even some of my white employees, my colleagues, writing stories that include popular passages and poems from the readings that I had while on campus. When we talk about what does the future of inclusivity at the table look like? What is the future of economics around food deserts, or everything from blockchain and food stamps that we wrote a piece on last week? And we've gotten amazing feedback on that, and all the way back to the foundation that I built at UNC, and the way that I'm able to lace that through food technology, a supply chain company, and our voice, and how much more valuable it is to really take the risk to speak on these things and include it, and make, and be bold. You know, it taught me to be bold. As you said, Dr. Taylor Bullock, around the affirmation that it brought to you when you got to campus. I really did not find that anywhere else from the entirety of my career until I stepped on campus. And now I think back to how at home it made me feel, and how now going back and bringing that into food, how I feel at peace, and I feel affirmed, and I feel empowered to bring those stories to my fellow food folk out here that don't look like me, and how excited they are for me to be and share that voice. And so I'm going to continue that throughout and I hope that folks can follow our blog series and be connected, and push us to talk more about it. We want more conversations and more students from UNC to be a part of what we're building as well.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to add one piece that has been really strong for me is how the FM department defined racism as structural. And so given the anti-racism work that I do, like that's inherent, helping people to understand that racism is more than individual bigotry and biases, that there's a history here, it's in laws, it's in policies. And the framework around, people of color can be bigoted and biased and prejudiced, but that connection to power and is inherent in racism. And we historically have not had that direct connection to power. And so I would teach that not only to my students, but I also teach that in our anti-racism workshops. When we're defining white supremacy and racism, I always make that statement very clear, that racism, inherent in racism, is a connection to power, and helping folks to be able to differentiate how that power belongs to those who identify as white. And we get pushback from it. There's some scholars now out there who are like, Black folks can be racist. And I'm like, well, the framework from which I'm coming from and the critical race theory lens that I have grown since my undergrad years, I'm going to stand firm on where I got that foundation in the FM department.
Thank you. Yeah, I know you're old school because you're still calling it the FM department. They done changed the name up 2-3 times. But I was wondering, could you put the links that you were talking about? You said you wanted people to follow your blog. There's a little chat section over here on the right. I would love to get your social media stuff up there so everyone who's listening, we've got 82 folks on right now, and also the website for the blog so we can follow that. And I just, as y'all were both talking, I was just thinking, like, we are really blessed to have had this lens, which is so impactful in our work. I am so glad that you are doing work in blockchain and in these technology lens, because it's not absent. Everybody who goes to school to study coding doesn't have this lens that you get from the Department of African American and Diaspora Studies. And I don't know about y'all two, but when I went home and told my parents what my major was going to be, and my grandparents, there's that question, what you gonna do with that major? Like, what you gonna do with that? Well, guess what? You can be an educator. You can be in food and technology. You can do everything. And no matter where you are, it will be an instrumental, important, vital part of your practice. So this is for all the, people out there maybe haven't figured out what their major is going to be, or for people, our department has been under attack, as Black studies departments across the country have been, in recent years and decades. And we want to tell you, deans, chancellors, this is important, this is valid, this is sacred, hallowed ground. And we need these spaces, especially at predominantly white institutions. So I want to move on to Octavia Butler. We're going to celebrate some ancestors right now. Last week was the birthday of the science fiction writer Octavia Butler. She has a quote from her book, Parable of the Sower. "Everything you touch, you change. Everything you change, changes you." And you already got into this a little bit, Riana, but could you talk a little more about how you have been touched by our food systems, and how you are changing them to address the structural racism, as Dr. Ronda Taylor Bullock, sorry for, there's a Natalie Bullock Brown, Dr. Natalie Bullock Brown, who is another precious colleague. So I apologize for mixing your names up. But yeah, I want to start with you, if we could, Ms. Lynn, about how have you personally been touched by our food systems, and how are you using your platform and your skill set to address the structural racism sewn into those institutions?
Definitely. I think there's a very interesting article out on Medium this week on that features us on how we need to turn Silicon Valley inside out and face real problems. And I told my team, and that we go after, is something that has affected all of us, especially Black people across this nation. When I went into food, when I went into grad school, my focus was on genetics, on nutrigenomics, right? Which is really the study of nutrition, genetics, and sort of your ancestral and food pathways. And what I found interesting, sort of coming out of UNC and going into this, was how much chronic disease has affected African Americans since slavery, how much industrialized food systems have affected us when it comes to chronic disease, mental health, cancers, and many other plaguing illnesses that we face, that face me, my family. I grew up with family members that face, diabetes and early onset Alzheimer's. And the more you research, and the more you find that food is inextricably linked to a lot of these problems, and then the more you see that Black people are pushed more processed manufactured foods, because we either live in food deserts, or because we go to schools that don't, as we are stressed out and we can't focus on shopping for great items, whatever it is, whatever it may be. Systemically, we get the bottom of the barrel. The same way we wrote the Langston Hughes poem in one of our recent pieces about eating in the kitchen when you're the darker brother, right? That's something that we've been facing since we landed here, is the inadequacy of quality food. And for my company and for me, I go off of years of knowing that it has affected me. It has affected my parents. It has affected all of my loved ones. It affects everyone here today, no matter what race you are. And so I now step into my team meetings. I go after our engineers and our data scientists to make sure that we're not only logging the information that is valuable for the companies that are making food for millions of people every day, but the way that we think about how the diets, and circling back to sort of how I jumped into food and genetics and research, and then ended up becoming an entrepreneur with early in my career. We need to make sure that we give back to sort of our historic eating And I found this super interesting quote in the book around Gichigola natural medicine and food culture, where just the things that we grew naturally coming out of the late 1800s and early 1900s before food was industrialized was so much better for our bodies. And that history now, even the plant, anything from plant-based diets just to growing more fresh items, is a large part of what's missing, what's not being taught in schools prior, outside of just going into a Black Studies program. It's not being taught in our homes, unfortunately, because we're marketed we're marketed a lot of mass items that don't necessarily fit our phenotype as Black people, that help us produce and live a very full and healthy life. And I would refer a great doctor, Dr. Milton Mill, YouTube, where he discusses the systemic racism of milk and how not even just Black people in America, but 65% of America is lactose intolerant. USDA funds milk farmers by the billions every single year to market milk, cow-based milk to us, and it is causing everything from lung inflammation to all types of chronic diseases and comorbidities. And these are, and knowing that history outside of, and what you said, Dr. Bullock, we have this long history of like systemic injustices that we need to know about. And that's very present in our food systems. And for me, as we use technology to think about the future of food, it's definitely the history of food that helps us shape how we can solve problems in a much faster and grander scale.
Yes, as you were talking about milk, it made me think of Octavia Butler's book, Wild Seed. And if you've read that book, the main character, Anyanwu, who is an ancient Black shapeshifter, Black woman, she tastes milk and is like, what are you people doing? Like, I don't understand. You cook with the pus from a udder of a cow? Like, she just couldn't fathom why humans would eat it. And it's interesting because I did think about that in the context of Black lactose intolerance and the food pyramid, and milk does a body good. Like, they have a budget to push milk on us, and in addition to a lot of other things. But that's interesting that you bring that up specifically in the spirit of Octavia Butler. I just wanted to raise that. Her book, Wild Seed, incredible book, wonderful book. So we're going to go back to you, Dr. Ronda Taylor Bullock. I want to ask you a similar question. How are you changing the educational institutions and their racist foundations through your work? What's next? What is the future?
All the things, right? We're trying in multiple ways. So I'll say that, first of all, we have a very supportive team of people who help us to co-create programs. And so with We Are, again, that stands for Working to Extend Anti-Racist Education. We use a three-pronged approach to dismantle systemic racism in education and beyond. We offer summer camps for kids in rising 1st through 5th grade, professional development for educators, and workshops for parents and families. And so we're taking this three-pronged approach to disrupt the system a little bit. And in some spaces, like in particular in Durham, we're able to use all three of those prongs in the same space, in the same county, and often ways in the same school system. And so for one, we're equipping kids with the knowledge to develop healthy racial identities, and to the knowledge to stand up to racism. So whether it be a classmate on the playground or a teacher. So empowering them with the language, a little bit of history, a little bit of knowledge to start pushing back and shifting things there. Then we hold workshops throughout the year. We just wrapped up one yesterday. Actually, we had a 3-day Educator Institute workshop where we have educators, community members, other professionals who come together. We help them understand how racism is structural and how it intersects with the educational system. And then we challenge them to look at systems in their local context, in their school districts, at their jobs, that are upholding disproportionalities along racial lines. For example, school discipline policies, curriculum, funding, access to advanced courses, who's included and who's excluded. And those are systems at a local level that have an exponential impact on a child's life and outcome. Think about the school to prison pipeline. Like, we help educators understand that in that pipeline, this isn't just a metaphor that's off over here in space. In that pipeline, educators are the pipes. Like, sit with that for a second, right? And so helping educators to understand that that pipeline starts with a write-up. When that write-up becomes official and in a system, now all the other systems are coming into play because it's been started for that one child. And helping them to understand our role, and I say our because I'm still an educator, that was our role in upholding that school to prison pipeline, and helping them to understand, what about restorative practices? What about harm-free zones? I'm pulling on Spirit House out of nonprofit Black women-led organization in Durham. But how are we rethinking discipline so that we can break up that school to prison pipeline? And so our organization is helping folks, particularly educators. We work most closely with them throughout the year to recognize where these systems are, where their power is, and help them to see their role in upholding and dismantling them. And so once we make those things visible to them, because it's hard to see, right? And the Racial Equity Institute out of Greensboro says that when racism becomes invisible, it thrives, right? And so we have to make it visible to them. And so helping them to rethink what policies in their schools need to be revisited, changed, disrupted. Also, what policies at the school district level. So in some of our schools, we've been able to form racial equity teams. And so we meet and coach those teams in looking at, okay, well, where are the areas here that you all need to disrupt, make visible, and now create a plan to shift and make them more racially equitable. And so those are just a few of the things that we've been doing to try to have that structural level impact, while we're also helping them to think about how you're treating kids, right? And how kids are seeing themselves in the school and affirming spaces. But also looking at those policies and procedures that are in schools that are disproportionately harming Black and brown children.
No, thank you for breaking that down. As you were speaking, I was just thinking about the amount of creativity that takes, to be able to envision a different system, to collaborate with others in co-creating new systems. It is a work of art, and I think that's one of the reasons why, as we call upon ancestors like Octavia Butler, who was a science fiction writer, a lot of the work she did was imagining. Same for you, Miss Riana. Like, it's imagining what different systems could exist. That is incredibly creative work. And if I were to extend the metaphor of us as doing creative movement work or social justice work or community work, I really, again, just want to shout out our professors, our teachers. You helped us think outside of the box. You helped us break down the colonial structures that invisibilize, to your point, the systems of white supremacy. That's just the world that you live in. So you really think about critiquing it until you have the tools to do so, in the same way that a master musician can really point out the nuances of a song and help you break it down so you can create your own music.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say that.
No, that's dope. And I like that you keep referencing Wild Seed. You know what? I read Wild Seed as an adult when I was teaching, and I struggled with it a little bit because it was so beyond what I had imagined, even how Black characters could exist. And it was actually, and I checked myself, there's a little bit of a disconnect. And I had to be like, well, Ronda, you've been even being an African-American double major, African-American studies double major, and even doing the work that I do, it's a constant work to decolonize your mind. Like, you never get there, right? So when I'm reading this book as an adult who's had these experiences, who had,
we can get there.
Right, you can still get there. We're getting closer, but I read it and I felt a distance, and I was like, Rhonda, you've never even seen Black characters portrayed like this before. And then as I continue forward, and I had to break down this box that I had put Black characters in that I didn't even know I had put them in. And she was very futuristic and allowed me to explore and imagine and co-create with her like another way of being and existing, even in literature, right?
Yeah. Imagine and manifest. That is really the work that we're all doing, because we're working in systems that have been established and are rooted in structures that are very strong and resilient. But we also have that strength and resiliency with us to transform the status quo. We learned that from Harriet Tubman. We learned that from all of our ancestors who've done so much incredible work. So I want to raise another ancestor up, Mwalimu Zora Neale Hurston, who said, "Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It astonishes me. How can anyone the pleasure of my company? It's beyond me." I just love the swag of that statement. Like, I'm dope. Get with me. You know what I mean? Yeah, that discrimination stuff, like, that's for the win. So shout out to Mwalimu Zora Neale Hurston for that, bringing that poetry to that quote. And I want to bring that same, where is your poetry? Where do you find pleasure? How do you tap into your resilience when we're entrenched in this work that can be very difficult, when we're looking at systems that feel so, so huge and so difficult to break down and to create something new? Where do you find your joy? Dr. Ronda Taylor Bullock, you want to start?
I found my joy in working with the children. So as I mentioned, we do an anti-racism summer camp for kids. 1 week is for kids in rising 1st through 2nd grade. And then we have another week for kids in rising 3rd through 5th grade. And being in that space and watching them gain access to this, probably didn't have at that age. I'm talking about 6 and 7-year-olds, 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds. And watching them, one, come in having already some form of understanding on their own, and then watching them grow and be able to learn and use the language and ask questions and push ourselves. It checks me as an adult, because I'm sad because they're still having to learn this. Like, don't you think we should be beyond this? But we're not. And they inspire me. It is so inspirational. I'm like, y'all are going to be better than us. The world better get ready for you. Educators, you're going to have educators who are going to fight alongside you, and then you're going to have some educators that you may have to fight and push back against, but y'all going to be ready. Like, this group, y'all are ready. And then I would say, just seeing my children have a much stronger foundation and growing up in a more affirming way than what I, experienced in some way, and watching them like use the language now as a 6-year-old. My daughter's 6, Zaire is 6, and our son Zion is 9, and how they are processing the world and saying things and to name and call something racist in a way that I didn't have that language to. So when I see the young people, I get emotional. I want to cry. I'm about to cry now. And seeing our children, and my daughter, that girl, she has my heart. Both of my kids do. And my daughter, she saw me, she heard me giving a speech. I was at a rally, and she saw the video. And she was like, I got a song that I want to do too. And so I was like, okay. And so I just recorded her. She's making up this song. And in the song, she made up this really cute song. And she was like, white people, you need to chill. And then she said, chill on your anger, calm down. And like this song, it was so cute. Like I didn't give her the words; those were her words. And then she switched the verse and said, "Police officers, police officers, police officers, you need to chill." And went through that same cadence. And so I didn't give her those words. I didn't tell her to say them. She saw that speech, and then she was like, "I got a song," and it came out of her. And I'm up here like, you did me when I was growing. You just did, like, y'all gonna be all right. And so seeing those moments, that inspires me when it affirms and lets me know I'm walking in my purpose. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, because the seeds We're passing it down to the children. Pass it down to the children, as Assata Shakur reminds us. And I'm getting to see that, and it just gives me lots of joy.
Thank you for sharing that story. Can I share a story before we hear from you, Riana? It's just, you were talking about daughter, and I'm thinking about my daughter, Stella. She just turned 10. And so maybe 3 years ago now, around Valentine's Day, I find a letter. This is a letter she has written to herself, a love letter to herself on Valentine's Day. It said, I'm paraphrasing, but it said something like, I like Black people and girls. And here's why adult girls shouldn't be called women, because we need a name that doesn't have men in it. So from now on, we will call ourselves Whoa Whoa. And because we need our own name, and it's nice to be unique. And I was reading this letter. I came to her, Stella, tell me about this. She's like, yeah, Whoa Whoa, that's just, women. Like, we're not just some appendage of men. We are our own beings, and we will be called now. Right, Dad? It's like, yeah, right, Stella. You nailed. And the thing, it was real subtle, but the thing I loved about how she ended the letter, she said, it's nice to be unique. It was almost as if she was anticipating, whoa, what you mean? Like, not understanding it or not getting it. And her preemptive response is, yeah, well, whoa, that's right. And it's nice to be unique. So I'm already quantifying this as cool because it's different. And yeah, likewise, they have such wild and creative and unhindered imaginations. And we as adults need to figure out how to get back there, because we need that with the power that comes with being in an adult body to be able to enact some of the change that they dream up so effortlessly. So definitely inspired by young people, the work I do at Black Space, my own kids, the students, Ali Musaleh, you know what it's like to have brilliant students. You're listening to 2 of them right now, going in, 2.5. I'll take some credit, and so yeah, that's what legacy is. It's planting seeds so that future generations can harvest the fruit of your labor. And we appreciate the labor that the love that you poured into us. So yes, Riana, please tell me more about how you find joy and what brings you pleasure.
Yeah, no, I want to go into 2 things. So one, and I want to be mindful of a question that came through, so I'm structuring it this way. But first, I've found immense pleasure in traveling around the world and finding Black spaces in countries that tell you they're not of Black roots. Such places as, marginalized cultures and early free cultures in places like Colombia, South America, and places in Macau, Asia. And so I found so much joy in the culinary history and architectural history of these Black towns around the globe, and that gives me lots of pleasure to visit them and take trips far out and wide to really learn more about the past and sort of capture as if I were in that moment in the middle, like 1514 Cabo Verde, in some of the first streets and sidewalks and towns and systems in West Africa. Those things, that history and those moments and walking right through them gives me an immense amount of pleasure. And then honestly, business and rebuilding and building and invigorating other entrepreneurs has given me a tremendous amount of freedom, because small businesses provide over 60% of jobs today. We as Black founders, as Black entrepreneurs, as Black business owners have to continue to build on ideas. I came across a Nikki Giovanni quote recently where she goes into the style of Black people, our resilience, our creativity, and how she says, give us rotten peaches and we'll turn it into cobbler. And so recently I ended up moving from Chicago to Austin, Texas. And I live just a few blocks. I live in a very gentrified neighborhood where some of the properties are, over $1 million. It's historically Black. East Austin has a very long history. And there's still a strip of businesses. There's still, I see Black neighbors, but it's good for them if they haven't given it up because their property values are awesome, but they have been pushed out, unfortunately, a little bit to the outskirts of the city. But there's a Black barbecue spot called Sam's Barbecue. The grandfather, who died just over a decade ago, won the property off of I think a game of dominoes in 1957, and it became one of Austin's best barbecue decades. Now the owners are getting offers for $5 million here, $10 million there, so the property can be redeveloped into condos in a fast-growing area where Google and Whole Foods and Target have just built offices. And what they're most excited about is that we're working together to continue to keep the business thriving so they don't run into any tax issues, so they can stay in the family, so they can bring more profits and hire more of their own family members, and they can sell the property way down the road without pressure when it's much more valuable. Continue to develop the land themselves. And so making sure that Black business owners are empowered or have the tools they need to grow their businesses so that they can thrive. We know that we're very under-resourced, and that takes me to a question from Claire Brown about how we can obtain types of investment here as Black entrepreneurs. And for me, I'm one of the few Black women tech founders, Black women founders that have raised over $1 million from venture capitalists, have also scaled up from my bootstraps. And what's exciting today is that our creativity is being highlighted more than ever, especially with recent events. And what I urge the department to do is really think about ways, and I know a friend, Ronda here is on the call, is think about ways that we can collaborate more with like the department or with the entrepreneurship minor to make sure that more Black students, Black alums are founding and being supported in their businesses so that we can bring more resources and more venture capital to our amazing ideas. We are incredibly creative beings. We will solve some of the world's biggest problems, and I'm super excited to think about that intersection, and that's what really helps me thrive every single day, is to see other Black business owners hiring more Black people, creating their own wildest dreams, and creating freedom. There's freedom in not having debt. There's freedom in getting up to work on what you love the most. And that's what really gets me excited and keeps the resilience running through my blood.
Wow. Thank you. That was a great opportunity for us to shift. I love the shirt you're wearing. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Riana, Lynn, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. Ronda Taylor Bullock, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. And thank you for giving me a good segue to the Q&A. You were questions that's come from the audience. So I just wanted to say thank you for being here again. Mwalimu Saleh, thank you for inviting us. I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Kamara to lead the Q&A. Does that sound good? All right. Well, you're muted. Okay, good. You're unmuted now.
All right, thank you. So, well, I mean, this has been wonderful and very uplifting as a faculty member listening to your stories. It's very motivating again. So, before we move on to the Q&A, there is a wonderful note that came from an alumnus of the department, but also a former student of Dr. Hall that I would like to read to us before I move on to the Q&A. So, and this comes from Bruce Keynes. He says, this webinar is a wonderful tribute to Professor Perel and his legacy. Professor Hall was always kind and supportive of me, especially when I served as chair of faculty at UNC Chapel Hill from 2014 to 2017. Professor Hall was always patient and welcoming in a way that few could. Found him always to be wise, thoughtful, and kind. I learned so much from him, a true inspiration. This panel is truly remarkable, knowledgeable in so many ways, incredibly insightful and incisive. So this is a powerful statement again on our acknowledgement of Dr. Perry's legacy that still lives with us. Moving to the questions, we've received a lot of them. So to the audience, please understand that we are struggling with time here. If I don't get to your questions, it's a matter of just timing. The first question goes this way. How does the AAAD department, in your experience, of course, as alumni, how does the AAAD department and how did that serve you in your real life experiences?
Okay, I can answer that question first. So, is there a place where the questions are written down?
Yes.
Oh, I see it. How does the department cover intersectionality, and how do you feel that affects me? You know, intersectionality was a huge part of my experience in the AAAD department. Reading the works of Bell Hooks, hearing for the first time a term like Polly Murray, for example, Jane Crow, which looks at the intersection of the ways in which women in particular experience a particular type of Jim Crow. Looking at the feminist movement through the lens of Bell Hooks, where she's critiquing white feminism and patriarchy simultaneously, and really analyzing, as Dr. Taylor Bullock, decolonizing. A lot of the decolonizing I had to do was around patriarchy and around the ways in which my privilege as a Black man impacts the movement spaces that I occupy. So, I've been involved in, political activism and community organizing work. I ran for mayor, and, patriarchy everywhere. And I'm aware of it and hip to it, even the extent to which I internalize it because of the wonderful, loving, intersectional curriculums that were so present in our department. So for me personally, it's been really huge and really life-changing. I mean, to this day, literally yesterday, I was speaking with some organizers about some brothers, other Black men, about checking their patriarchy. And I'm able to be that accountability holding ally because of radical Black feminists and the way that they were gracious enough to share their gems with the world. From Toni Cade Bambara to Audre Lorde and in classes, and no other department on campus outside of AAAD. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, and I want to refer to the Harlem Renaissance class that I took with Professor Kenneth Shankin, and the intersectionality of all Black lives, right? And of the LGBTQ history of the Harlem Renaissance, for example, and the readings of Richard Bruce Nugent. And that discovery for me, I still find present in days and times when, I lived in New York or traveled to New York, and especially it being Pride Month, that history, lots of the Black trans lives that we're losing today. Those are things that I did not have conversations around, that we couldn't openly and honestly and sort of address, especially at the young age of 18, 19, where we may come from communities where those things are not taught, or we may have LGBTQ folk in our family or our communities, and we don't really know how to address the problems that they face on top of being Black. And I'm very, very grateful for the intersectionality of those readings. Also classes where we learn more about being Black and coming from Central America and Caribbean and South America, and those stories and those things that we have to address quite often. And I think it goes to show just how important this department is, but also how, what are maybe some of today, I'm wondering if the students on the campus, I think, should all have to take a class from the department. I don't know what the enrollment or the matriculation is like, but I can't imagine not having a touch of it for everyone that walks through the campus.
And I add one more really quick thing that just to kind of build on what you were saying, Riana. And this is actually specifically the question about how it impacts your work. So I used to run a program called Beat Making Lab. It was this international, hip hop education program. And we did a project in Kenya, in Nairobi. And we were going to work with this community organization called, I won't mention their name because maybe, I don't know. I won't mention their name, but they were a great community organization that did graffiti murals and political protests. But we found out when we were in with them to do the beat making workshop there, and this was like a big PBS project. It was a web series. When we were interviewing with them, we noticed some red flags around their politics around the LGBT community. It was a homophobic organization. And it was that intersectional lens that helped us decide that this is not the right fit for us. There are some parts of our politics that are aligned and other parts that are not aligned. And we ended up going to a different community center, which I will name, called The Nest, which is an amazing LGBT inclusive, creative space. And it really, our experience there and the dialogue that we had with the other organization around their politics really impatient. So it just, I can't speak enough, as Black folks traveling to places like, Nairobi and in South and Central America, where the political situation might be completely different. There are people getting killed for being queer in Nairobi, and as they are here in the United States as well. Trans folks' lives are being lost daily, but I just want to say that developing that lens and that politic through the department has had direct impact on creative, entrepreneurial, political projects that I've engaged in personally. And I definitely up in the Black church, like I would not have had that same lens had it not come from, interacting with these texts and these classmates in the department. Sorry, I just wanted to build on that before.
No, and I'll just quickly say it. I remember taking, and I know this professor's last name has changed. I was sitting here trying to look it up, so I wanted to say it correctly. But when I was an undergrad, she was Dr. Valerie Kalin. And now I believe, but nonetheless, she taught a Black women's studies class, changed my life. I will say that I remember one book, When Heads Come Home to Roost. I still have that book. I still make references to it. All of the reading that she had us to do in that class was very powerful. And also, like growing up, most of my experiences I felt that I had were because I was Black. And that always took center. And then being in a class that had you look intentionally at what it means to be a woman, helped clarify some other experiences, right? And also helped me to feel seen in, again, that visibility and that affirmation in ways that I wasn't always getting, and helped me to rethink of myself as a Black woman feminist, right? And just having that course, having her, she was a professor, and the books and the text that we read, just again helping us to see that intersectionality, making that visible for us in ways that I didn't get in other courses. And it was just, I remember her, and she was just very strong, and definitely left an impression on me and the other folks who took classes.
Wonderful. So you may see some thematic disconnection here, because I will just read the questions the way they came. Right. So the next question is about the difference in obtaining investments, venture capitalists as Black entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I can dive into that. I mean, one thing to remember is that there's several ways to access capital. Venture capital is sort of one of the later stage ways to really kick things off, and it's dilutive, right? So they take some ownership in your company. There's now a lot more resources for sort of community, sort of launching your company online with resources where your friends and family can fund your ideas. And so today, more than ever, community and voice mean a lot to building your ideas. I could take it from a business that I've helped or seen grow along the way, Brooklyn Tea, a Black-owned food company up in Brooklyn, beverage company, Partake Foods, another UNC grad, a Black-owned alternative cookie company. And these folks started with bootstrapping from their own salaries, from their friends and family, and $25,000 can go a long way. So you may hear $1 million is what you need to build your dreams, but no, you just need a community, a voice, and to keep chipping at it, and know that it's a long ride that hits you with a lot of barriers. And once you sort of prove that out, there's a lot more resources today, such as accelerators, grants, pitch competitions that will help you prove out your model, hit a product market fit so you know your customers really want what you need. But what I am most excited about is that Black companies are finally getting a little bit more recognition, and Black investors are now launching more funds to support Black entrepreneurs. Backstage Capital is one very prominent one, led by LGBT women out of LA, that is funding companies $25,000 checks or more. And there's a lot more Black funds that are now out to write the initial angel and venture capital checks. And they're very Googleable now. And that was really part of the problem. You walk into a room as a Black founder with a great idea, or you want to start a hair care company, which now many of them are doing really well, and a white investor may not know your target market or your solution can work and build on millions and billions of dollars. And so we have to solve the problem around Black investors. And now today there's more Black investors than ever, more Black funders and resource opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, the minor program to, if you want to do the AAAD major, I would suggest going into the E minor, led by a Black man, Bernard, and some great staff of former Carolina alums that are also happen to be African American. And so I would suggest that's a great combination right there. And continue to out to people like me that are founders. We're all in this together, because the more of us that win and exit our companies, the more that we can go back and invest in other young talent after you graduate and spin out your ideas. And so good question, and looking forward to continuing connecting and intersecting the community.
I don't have as much to offer regarding venture capitalists, particularly because we're a nonprofit, and so I just do want to echo what Riana said, though, that we use a lot of, we're grassroots, and the community is funding us. And so we've used crowdsourcing, we've used Facebook fundraisers. It does not take a percent of the donations that people give. And so we like to use them so we get everything that folks donate. It currently has we're doing a fundraising campaign right now. We're trying to raise $100,000. We've so far had over 1,200 people give. And through Facebook alone, we have almost $55,000 raised. We're trying to build some infrastructure, and because we're not getting the grants, we're not getting the fellowships that some people, because our organization says anti-racism, because we talk about white supremacy, and the people with the money aren't necessarily trying to pour into us. We've gotten feedback before saying we don't think the applicant has realistic expectations, and we don't believe the community will be receptive to this work. We have a history that this work, that actually receptive and wants more. So we're not getting that type of funding. So we're doing grassroots level funding. And then we have a funding model where we are a profit generating nonprofit. And so we provide services that people pay, that we're able to survive and generate funds for our organization.
Wonderful. The next question is more of a comment / question. And it goes, another ideology of Octavia Butler of emergent strategy, the idea of an adaptive, collective, cohesive, and community-led change that would become a deeply woven habit in society. From your time as students, how do you feel young people can work towards emergent strategy and best prepare ourselves for imminent change? Furthermore, how can we shape this change for good?
I can take a stab, because I feel like that's what we're doing through We Are. We're building community. Thing that helps us with the change that we're trying to make is that we're starting in our own context. So some people like to start organizations or start work and go in someone else's community and on behalf of them as outsiders, even as well-intentioned folks. But for us, like we started in our own community. So for example, with We Are, the work that we're doing, I went back to Durham, which is where I taught. And so I already had a community there. And so I already trusted me. I already had relationships. And so even though I was talking about anti-racism, which 5 or 6 years ago in the educational space, people weren't really welcoming like that. And so, but people trusted me because of the relationships that I already had. And so when we would hold an event, people came. And so then people heard about those events and started telling other people about them. So for example, when we did the anti-race summer camp for kids in rising 1st through 2nd grade, first of all, we might be the only anti-racism summer camp in our country for that age group that is explicitly anti-racism. And so it was kind of out there. So we had that was in 2016. We now have, this past summer, we were supposed to have 4 different camps, 2 in Greensboro, 2 in Durham, and we would have had about 150 kids between the 4. And so what I'm saying is start in your local context, in your community, and stay true to your values of what it is that you're trying to do, and then find other like-minded people and continue to grow together. Something else that people told me when I first started setting out to do was to find folks in the community who are already doing that and work alongside them and learn, right? And not necessarily try to create something new from scratch, but have somebody who's already has a strong foundation, and then latch on and partner, learn under them, and then break away. And that's what We Are did. We worked alongside Dr. Sandy Darity, and out of his space at the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity at Duke. Like we were housed there for a little while, and then when We Are was able to stand on its own, then we became our own 501c3. But we didn't start out immediately as our own independent organization. We had the help of mentorship and of a whole center that was doing this work on a much larger scale to support us. And so again, I believe in starting in your local context, finding like-minded folks, and building up from there. And we believe that we're doing definitely emergent strategy work. Like we're adding on each year. We're growing out. Our reach is growing and farther. And so people believe in the work that we do based off of our record and the history that we have already established in the community.
I could add a little bit to that, just briefly. Earlier, Dr. Taylor Bullock mentioned Spirit House and their wonderful Black women-led abolitionist group, and they do reading. They actually have a bunch of practices. They write haikus, they do reading, they make direct actions. They do a lot of work at the intersection of creativity and organizing. I would encourage folks who are interested in strategy, and this is certainly how I became familiar with the term and the work, is by reading. The Spirit House had a reading group looking at Octavia Butler's book. There's Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Emergent Strategy. There's Toshi Regan, the child of Bernice Johnson Regan of Sweet Honey in the Rock, who was here in Chapel Hill just 2 years ago doing the Parable of the Sower. Oh, there's your Emergent Strategy book. It's one of my favorite books. And Toshi said something real interesting. 2 shows at Memorial Campus, and at the end of the show during the talk back, was talking about open up your spaces. If you have privileged access to a space, provide it. Open it up for an artist. You have a church, office space, let artists and organizers come into those spaces and have some room to think and to breathe and to ideate and collaborate and dream or to rest. One of the things we lack as a people is access to spaces that we can use to do the work. And a lot of that work is collaborative, and we need spaces. So if you got the keys to a basketball court or to it, be generous with that privileged access and open it up to folks in community. Because sometimes you forget, being on that campus in Chapel Hill is a very privileged space to be. It is an ivory tower. They got rooms where the blinds are controlled by a remote, screens, all types of stuff. And one thing is, being born and raised in Durham, is trying to think about ways we can open up the halls of those privileged institutions to the folks that could really use some of those resources, to ideate and create.
Wonderful. Excellent. Again, another note that came to us here in the chat box, which is again a heartfelt sort of comment that I wanted to read to you all, from Dr. Perry Hall's sister. I am Dr. Perry Hall's sister, his big sister, as he used to refer to me, although he was the big brother. I wanted to thank you for this webinar honoring my brother. He would be very pleased with the discussion and especially the input of his former students who have gained knowledge by being instructed by him. Thought this was a wonderful note. So let me
Can I build on that?
Yes, please go ahead.
For Emily Hall and those on the call who may be a part of the Hall family or have been mentored by Dr. Hall, I just want to say that he was a very special man, and I loved seeing him walk through campus with his curly ponytail, and his scruffy beard. He was just so charming and warm and thoughtful and wise. And he was one of the Dr. Saleh. Was he one of the founding professors for the department? He was part of that first cohort, or at least very early in the department, wasn't he?
Yeah, but yes, and more importantly, he was. Oh, there's an echo. I don't know what.
It's probably me. I'll turn my mic down.
Okay, yeah. All right. So, yeah, thank you, Pierce, and thank you, Emily. Dr. Hall is the founding figure of the discipline of African American Studies. Going back to the 1960s, he was part of that first generation of African American intellectuals who really pushed for the emergence of this field, and he devoted his life to the study of the African American experience. So he is a major figure in the field, and so we were very lucky that he joined us for 28 years. But he was doing this work before some of us really started engaging with key texts in African American studies. So he's a major figure in the field. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to shout some praise for him because he was
and thank you for doing that, Pierce. That's wonderful. So this is the last question we have here before we can wrap up. It's 4:21 already. And this comes from a faculty member here, right? Dr. Samuel. Thank you for all your fantastic and inspiring commentaries so far. As a AAAD professor, I find that students often experience AAAD classes as being politically transformative and life-affirming, as you all have noted, but struggle with various external pressures. Those students, they struggle with external pressures to choose majors that feel somehow more practical to them. What would you say to current UNC students who may be interested in continuing their learning journeys as AAAD majors or minors, but struggle with the pressure to explain how this major can serve their lives and careers in the future? Thanks, Petal, for the question.
I'll say, oh, go ahead, Riana.
Thank you. I would say do any major you want, and do it with pride. I think one thing that we all have to realize and be prepared for, and even the administrators at the universities and colleges across the country have to know what the future looks like in terms of skill building, and what you need to present in terms of your experiences and skills that will make you the best future possible leader and employee and change maker. And those are skills around communication and creativity and oftentimes STEM, coding, those things that align you for great jobs or to be prepared to be a great manager and leader. And so I think that what it presents is looking at your career and your curriculum and the classes you take as something that is somewhat comprehensive in sort of the supporting and complementary classes. But today, I feel like everyone can take any and go into any major that so drives their spirit, as long as you understand what the jobs and the skills and the internships and some of the additional building that you need to do around that.
I'll first say that African American Studies was my double major. So I majored in English so that I could get into a Master of Arts in Teaching program, so that I could become a high school English teacher. So I understood that in that space, I needed the English major so I could teach, but I wanted the African American Studies or the AAAD major. What I will say now, what current undergraduates have right now that I didn't have or we didn't have coming through is that the world needs AAAD majors right now. You have, in this context of the racism that we're experiencing now, people are looking for folks who better understand this context in which we're operating right now. People are going to be looking to hire folks who can explain, who can disrupt systems, who recognize how to create change based off of currently doing. And I feel like, because even for me as an organization, people are reaching out to find us to do more work now than they would have done 15 years ago when I was in undergrad. And I say that to say that this knowledge now, even though the world is just now valuable, it was always valuable. It was always a necessary major. It was always work that can be done. But the world is waking up to, wow, we are in this space that most of us and many of us who don't have this background information can explain, we don't understand, and people are trying to learn. And so now when you all graduate out of this major, you are the expert in something that there's a lot of gaps in a lot of different jobs and a lot of different professions where they don't have what you all are going to have. And so to anyone, I will say right now in this moment, coming out of this field, you are an expert. You're going to know more in this space. You're all going to be able to better explain the context in which we're operating in ways that other folks won't be able to do it. And even if we weren't in that context, this major still matters. This information was still valuable, right? Because the world, our attention as a world will shift. But I do believe that there's no way we're going to go back to where we were before with this the COVID pandemic and the racism pandemic, right? And so it's becoming more visible to other folks that this knowledge is necessary in this time. And you all are in a major time such as this. Right. And so I think take as many courses as you can, recognize that if the avenues aren't there, you all have been equipped with the skills to create for yourselves, to create new. There was no anti-racism organization that was specific to education when I came out of my PhD program 2 years ago. And so now my education, because I'm smart enough now, right? I got all this knowledge, I should be able to create, to curate. I call myself the lead curator of our organization. And so I think you do that. Y'all are smart. You've got this information that other folks don't have, and now you got to leverage it. Other people need to help them make sense of the mess that they're making. And so that's the attitude that I say that you take into it. And then as your creative juices are flowing and you see something out there that maybe doesn't currently allows you to use that knowledge, create that. Don't go out thinking you're about an employee. Go out thinking you are the employer. And so that's what I feel. That's the confidence. That's the affirmation that I feel the department gave me and allowed me to believe that I can even do this. Right. And so I'm thankful for it. And that's the challenge that I give to folks who are wrestling with, what can I do with this major?
Yeah, I want to echo that. And this is a good final question. I know we're wrapping up at 4:30. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll try to be super brief. And this is, I think, a good place for us to end. So for those of you out there trying to explain this major to your family members or whoever is putting that external pressure on you, I mean, look at any field. When I think about film, in the Oscars, the first thing that comes to mind is Oscars so white. That they have a big diversity problem in filmmaking, in the food systems, as we've talked about, in education, coders. There's this huge digital divide in tech. The media is calling Black people riot crazy thugs and calling white folks after a Carolina Duke game just, wild teens. It's different. The disparities are there. Healthcare, everywhere, these disparities exist. And people with that intersectional Black lens are needed in every single field. And there is nary a place on a campus like UNC that you're going to get it like the AAAD department. So I would tell them that, if we want the film industry to continue as it has been with minimal positive representations of Black folks, then keep doing film school and film school only. If you want it to evolve into something that's more inclusive, then have people with different backgrounds, filmmaking industry from a Black studies perspective. Like, for example, Ryan Coogler, the guy who directed Black Panther and Fruitvale Station. And you can clearly see what classes he was taking out there in Cali by the type of films that he makes today. So I do think that it should be mandatory for everyone to take a AAAD class. And for those trying to explain it, our work has never been more necessary in every single field.
Wonderful. So now it's up to you. You tell me what you want to do. I mean, time is up, but this is an important question that I think you must, I mean, you may want to address as students of AAAD, but also because the situation concerns all of us. May I go ahead and read this question to you? The last one. It's actually a set of 3 interrelated questions. Muallimu Yunus, or you just tell me.
You have the final question and then we'll go.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, let me go ahead. So it reads like this. I have 3 provocative, by the way, the question comes from Bruce Keynes, the earlier intervener. I have 3 provocative related questions here. First, I am a white person as classically defined by Neil Irvin Painter. More specifically, I am an old, cisgender, heterosexual, privileged, substantially institutional, empowered white male academic. I believe most white people who have no understanding of what changes need to happen, no matter how righteous they might be. With that, from your perspective, panelists, do you believe white people, especially progressive white allies in education, business, and activists, truly understand their role in the creation of sustenance of structural racism defined by Professor Saleh? The second question, if not, how do you educate them that among the crucial changes that need to occur includes changing how they think and what they do as quote unquote allies? Finally, what specifically do you think powerful white people in academic or in academia should do besides listen, learn, and support in order to facilitate the substantial changes that need to occur? Please feel free to be direct.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I was gonna give it to Riana if she wanted to speak first.
Yeah, no, that's a question, but I think for me, I saw it 3 weeks ago. An investor reached out to me. We had a conversation, I think on like June 3rd, and by June 8th, he emailed me. He emailed me before my existing white investors. He emailed me before some of my Black female investors, and just apologized for what I had, from what maybe I'm going through as a Black founder with COVID and with a lot of the race protests that are happening now, and sort of just the heavy news that we seem to feel is coming in every single day. And at the end of that email, he didn't just apologize, but he wrote essentially and agreed to wire $100,000. And this is a old white guy that lives on a ranch in the middle of Texas. And I think, and I said to myself that one, he sort of admitted to his own privilege. So seems to understand that, and that my journey as a Black female founder will come with 10 times more barriers than anyone else, a white guy with maybe my same idea. And what we first need to do is make sure that white cisgendered males of privilege that come from liberal and well-established backgrounds, very honest about their existing privilege. And I start, and then from there, we need to make sure that we all understand that when especially Black women win, that doesn't mean that less white folk have a seat at the table necessarily. we can all win. We can all build a great community, great countries, and we need to admit that just that fear of seeing other folks win doesn't necessarily mean that your life will be limited in any way. And there's a lot more complexity to that, but I just wanted to start.
Yeah, I will say, as a critical whiteness scholar, like that's what I study. White people learn to become white, how they embody their whiteness, and then zooming in, how children learn to embody whiteness. And to the first question, do you believe white people understand and know? No, a lot of them don't, and that's not an excuse, right? They've been conditioned to unsee. They've been conditioned to love their blindness. It has to be made visible. They have to first want to learn, because they can definitely have the capacity to go and learn and educate themselves, and not anyone else to teach them. So no, a lot of folks don't. And a lot of folks aren't putting out, and let me say specifically white folks, aren't putting out the effort to educate themselves, instead relying on asking a colleague of color or a person of color to teach them. I mean, and if you have a relationship, a beneficial relationship with someone, then yeah, you can check in with them every once in a while, but you also have to carry that emotional labor on yourself, right? You have to take ownership of that. If not, how do we educate them? I believe that folks have to seek out opportunities to learn, seek out anti-racist organizations that are doing that work, that are skilled at doing that work, such as we are, such as the Racial Equity Institute out of Greensboro, and gain some of that knowledge and sit in spaces where you're made to feel uncomfortable and push through that discomfort toward action. One of the things that I've been pushing and will do through We Are is help people to shift away from centering guilt and shame and center humility. Humility is an emotion. It's a way of benefit people of color more than white folks' guilt and shame. And I'm not saying you shouldn't feel guilty or you shouldn't feel shame, but oftentimes those are paralyzing, and where you're not growing, and people of color aren't receiving any benefits from that. So center some humility those ways. And what do I think powerful white people and academics can do? Step aside. There is a Black woman specifically, and if not, there's a person of color in your department for half as much, and that voice needs to be promoted. That voice needs tenure, because tenure gives you a higher salary and it gives you job security. So promote the people of color in your department, step down from those leadership positions in the department, and ensure that a person of color who is accountable to their community and who also has an understanding of racial equity. So I'm not just saying find a Black person and put them there, but oftentimes in these spaces when Black folks are there, they worked really hard to get there, and many of them have that racial equity lens, right? And so stepping aside, literally giving up those positions of power to promote other people of color who have been there, who've been working hard, who've been erased, who've been talked over, who have not been validated, who have not been affirmed, and put them there. And one of the last things that I'll say, and there's so many more, right? Adding on to what Riana mentioned, use your finances. Invest in Black women-led organizations. Invest in minoritized or minority-led organizations, right? Send your funding there. Become sustainers. Where you're monthly, because there are oftentimes Black and brown women, queer folks, people of color doing work on the ground, but they're not getting the funding. You can look at the numbers. The funding goes to white-led organizations, oftentimes white men, and then they're going into Black and brown communities. They're poverty pimping, which is a term I got from REI. And then they'll leave the community and take the resources out when the grant in, right? Who are living in the communities where they're trying to create change, but they can't get access to funding. So there's funds there, and help do some fundraising in conjunction with, not on behalf of, because you need to be in community with the people, right, to make sure that's the support that they want. But direct funds there. You have access. People are willing to maybe donate to you. Now you take that money and now you donate it to these organizations that are on the ground that need that financial support. And so those are just a few things that I'd recommend that white folks do specifically.
I have nothing to add. That was, thank you.
Wonderful, Snaps. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Pierce. Well, you're the moderator. I was just facilitating with the questions. So it's all yours for now. I'm out.
Okay, well, I'll be very brief. Thank you, everyone, for all of our distinguishing. Thank you, Dr. Saleh, Dr. Kamara, for facilitating the Q&A, for holding the space and inviting us to be here, and to all our participants for being engaged, asking great questions, and a special thank you and shout out to the family of Dr. Perry Hall. We love you, and you know, we are grieving takes a lot of forms, and this is an important part of our grieving process as we remember, as we honor and celebrate the legacy of Dr. Perry Hall. This was a great step in that grieving process. So much love to your family. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. Have a nice Friday.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend.